Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit, and time to aim an alpha strike squarely at Audiosurf 2. Why is there an Audiosurf 2, you might ask? Well, that's a question that's fairly easy to answer. The developers wanted more money, which is entirely reasonable, because that is what they are doing for a living. I decided to put some music in the background of the menu because inexplicably it doesn't have any. That's a little bit odd. It's like, hey, here's a game about music. No music in the opening screen. So, this has been updated in a fairly major way already. It is very much still in early access, and it shows. I mean, the interface is an absolute mess. It was even worse before the patch. You got this right here with a browser window basically embedded in there. So, that's not too great either. But again, that's acceptable because it is in early access, and you shouldn't be buying games in early access if you are not prepared for the ropiest of rope. So it actually has an options menu now. It's not really much of it, but there you go. We can just leave that as it is. So what is it all about? Well, it's not quite the same as the first one, but it does have the same mode. So this is what it all comes down to, really, what mode you play Audiosurf in. You may have seen some footage of Audiosurf 2 already, and you'll probably seen the wakeboarding mode, which is their flagship mode this time around, which actually involves some degree of surfing. As you can see in the tiny, tiny window, and if you are not watching this in full screen, fie on you, you're screwed, you will notice that there is some wakeboarding going on, and some jumping, and some tricks, and things like that, but the traditional modes are still there, like Mono, which was the most popular mode in the previous Audiosurf, and spawned many a YouTube video. It's pretty much where the competitive scene came from. Then you got Mono Turbo as well, a faster version of Mono. Pusher's back in, which is something that no one ever plays. And then you've got stuff like Double Vision, which also is kind of a game that no one really plays. Now, this time around, they thankfully have unlocked all the modes from the very start. The early version of it only had 3 modes unlocked until you got a ridiculously high score from one jump on a particular song. The funny thing is that some of those songs didn't even have a high enough jump to get the score from, so it was a gigantic pain in the arse. However, they've unlocked everything now. So you've got Wakeboard Pro, you've got Wakeboard Puzzle, and Wakeboard Elite, so there's like 5 wakeboard modes, and then you've got 2 mono modes and Pusher and Double Vision. Now what you also have is the Steam Workshop this time around. This is kind of a big deal, because they're going to allow you to make your own modes and mods. This could give Audiosurf 2 essentially an infinite life cycle, which I think would be very interesting indeed. Will we see the next mono mode come out of this? We might. It also has integration promised for SoundCloud, which means that if you don't actually have an MP3 collection, you can pull stuff from SoundCloud. What you can't do is pull stuff from Spotify and things like that. So those of you who don't have an MP3 collection anymore, well, you're kinda screwed, unfortunately. You're not going to be getting all that far with this game. A few skins available as well. They actually put the classic one back in, which was nice, because one of the biggest complaints I had of Audiosurf 2 prior to playing this update is that these two right here don't have the dividers on each of the 3 lanes like the classic mode does. So it's very difficult to play mono with these different skins. So we'll play Neon to start with, and we'll start with a wakeboard grid, because this is obviously the mode that they wanted to show off. This is the mode that they're saying, hey, you know, this is definitely our jam now, and you can actually surf your music this time around. So we can have a look through my rather extensive collection of video game soundtracks. There are many, many things here. Big Giant Circles, Mass Effect. We could do any of these. They're all probably pretty good because they're by Big Giant Circles. This is actually, I think, a bunch of unused stuff from Mass Effect 2 or something like that. So let's give this a try. Alright, here we go. So let's get in. Okay, so the point of wakeboard mode in Audiosurf 2 is to try and get big jumps. Yeah? But you can also collect blocks on the grid as well, and by doing so you can build up a multiplier, which you can then, hopefully, if you get the right kind of jump, combo with a bunch of tricks to get extra points. So let's begin, shall we, and show you exactly what's going on with wakeboard mode. Alright, so we shall begin. Now before that, you actually saw a little map there, which kind of showed you what was going on in terms of the track and where the big jumps were. So you better remember those, and good luck actually remembering them. I never can, personally, but... Now, the point of this mode is to try and go to the wake on the side of the screen and get a big jump, and then do a bunch of stunts, which are controlled with the 1 through 4 keys, or certain mouse controls if you prefer that. So you can't really customize your stunts in any way, shape, or form, but what you can do is select which one you want to do based on how long the jump is. So some of those stunts are just frankly too long, so you won't actually be able to do them. In this particular mode, they let you get away with that instead of actually crashing on using a stunt that is, say, too long for the jump you've gone on. But aside from that, you basically have 4 moves, and you can mix them up a little bit to get extra points if you have the time to do so. And that's kind of about it. Building up these blocks in the center of the grid will give you some points, but more importantly, they will give you the big modifier. However, this is where some of the problems come in. So it's an interesting mode, but it's got its issues. Firstly, the fact is that you are asked to develop a multiplier, and yet the multiplier disappears quite quickly, especially if you end up collecting more blocks than you should. I think you can kind of avoid the blocks for a while, and then they'll disappear as well, but because you don't necessarily know where the biggest jumps are, timing your maximum multiplier with these jumps is more of an exercise in luck, as far as I can tell, than anything else. There don't really appear to be all that many benefits to doing it. You just try and collect as many as you can and hope for the best. Now, secondly, the actual wakeboarding mechanic. The jumps are a little bit awkward, as you can see here. The animations are jumpy, to say the least. And the notion of going to either wake with the mouse is a little odd and unusual. It's not the kind of thing that you would necessarily expect from an Audiosurf game, which is fine. I don't mind them changing things around, but they don't appear to have done it in a... Let's not do that. That's Sega. They don't appear to have done it in a particularly reasonable way. Alright, let's go for a little bit of Ace Combat here, and we'll do another mission. I like the idea of it, for the most part, but I don't think it's all that well executed yet. There needs to be more smoothness, I would say. Oh, wow, that's a downhill jam. Look at that one. We could get some mega jumps here. There needs to be more smoothness in the transition between the wakeboarding and the actual jumping. Right now, it just seems like it clips between one and the other without any particular nuance to it. It's just like, generally, the animations are not that great yet. Obviously, it is in alpha, so there's plenty of work to be done in that respect. The stunt animations are fine, but I would expect that considering it's only 4 canned animations. They're not actually reactive to anything once you're in the air. You can't alter the stunts, so such is the way of things. Now, the last problem that I've got, I think, with wakeboarding in comparison to the usual modes that you would expect from an Audiosurf game is the fact that you don't get to collect blocks while you're in the air. You actually do nothing. You don't really have any control whatsoever while you're in there. You can move left and right, but there's no real benefit to it. It's like sometimes you're in the air for 6 or 7 seconds and you're not getting to dodge blocks and collect things and things like that, or set up a new jump. So you have these moments of maybe a little bit of acceleration, I would say. You know, you get both acceleration and acceleration. And it's kind of nice to watch, and it's definitely pretty, don't get me wrong, but there's no real gameplay to it. And there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of strategy either. Like, compare that to mono mode, for instance, and in mono mode, you've got to be consistently on the ball, all the time. Whereas in this mode, you're basically just trying to build up a multiplier and then hoping that you hit a big jump. And trying to pay attention to both the mini-map and to the game screen, which is always fun. I mean, right there, I was ready for the jump, but I didn't actually have a multiplier. Mostly because the blocks just disappear very quickly, so... Frankly, you don't really get a lot out of that. I just feel like they need to maybe redesign the way the multipliers work, so that the whole combination of multipliers and jumps is a little bit less random. It's not necessarily skill that's involved in actually hitting the jumps. Hitting the jumps is fairly easy for the most part. But there are just some songs where you will not get that multiplier. It's just not going to happen. Whereas if you want maximum score on a mono track, it's all down to your skill. Maybe you won't get as much score as another track, but that's fine, because scores are judged on kind of a track-by-track basis, so it doesn't really matter that much. Here, it feels like a lot of what I'm doing is luck-based as opposed to skill-based, and I'm not too keen on that idea. So, actually, this ended up being, as more of a flagship mode, it's actually more of a casual mode, really. Although, it took me a while just to get used to it in general. The explanation in the tutorial is kind of fine, and you're forced through that tutorial before you do anything else, but I just don't think the wakeboarding mode is currently that satisfying. And I think that people are going to be more interested in doing the mono mode, more so than anything else. The thing about the mono mode is that there aren't really any improvements to the mono mode. The mono mode is the same as what it was in the original Audiosurf, and since you can just import the same MP3s, at that point you might as well be playing the Audiosurf. I have a feeling that they're kind of relying on community involvement here. It may be that we see just a larger feature set in general, and perhaps the algorithms have been polished up a little bit. It's hard to say, really, especially in alpha. I would hope they're going to get better, but they're fine for the most part. But obviously this time around, the algorithms are more often than not focused on the idea of generating waves for you instead of anything else. So I'm not overly keen, I gotta say, on the wakeboarding mode. We'll play a little bit of mono after this, and I'll show you it in Neon, and then I'll show you it in the classic mode. And I suppose if you're a hardcore Audiosurf junkie, you can kind of judge for yourself whether or not they've improved the song algorithms. Right now, the menus certainly aren't improved, but again, alpha. These are all suggestions. These are all things that I feel actually need to be fixed in order to make the game more attractive to people. Alright, let's change mode around, shall we? And we'll go for just standard mono, and we'll play this in Neon originally. So we'll take another track, I think, from here. Oh, do we have Zero? Zero's so good. There we go. Play a little bit more Ace Combat. And here is mono. So if you're not familiar with mono, basically you hit the colors and dodge the grays. Really as simple as that. And you can hold left click to summon a minion who always hits every block. So that's really about it. Alright, this one's going to get pretty intense by the looks of it. Now for mono mode, you're generally encouraged to try and use the keys, yeah? Basically use A and D and then release for middle. And I released a little early there, but there you go. I wouldn't use the mouse for mono mode, frankly. It's not a really good way of doing things. You're going to have more luck here. One of the problems, I suppose, with this version in particular, especially with Neon, as I said, is that you generally don't have the guidelines that you had in the first game, which means that picking the right level is a little more difficult, and picking the right lane to go in for blocks is a little bit more difficult as well. They also, of course, have added a bunch of the waves in here as well, which actually obscures the blocks more often than not and makes them a little bit more difficult to see as you go through. So I think anyone who's going to be playing mono is most likely going to end up playing on classic mode. I don't see why you would play it on any other mode, frankly, because your view's just obscured too much, and that's not particularly good. Don't see why you'd allow that to happen. Don't get me wrong, it's nicer looking than the original, but if you're looking for competition, then you're gonna play in classic mode. This is the problem, isn't it? It's like, this is the same as the first Audiosurf. And I suppose whether or not this ends up being successful and actually worth your time really comes down to whether or not they actually get some worthwhile modes created by the community in the Steam Workshop. It's not to say that they won't add more modes later on, but you're then kind of taking away from the soul of what makes Audiosurf Audiosurf and why Audiosurf was popular in the first place, which was mono. I know, yeah, there are obviously some people that play in different modes, but not that many. Wow, this is tricky. Oh my. I haven't played Audiosurf in a while, and it is kicking my ass. And there's a mono turbo after this. I should play that just for a laugh. Well, there goes my stealth bonus. Such is the way of things. It is a lot more difficult to play without that grid, without the lanes. It's like, it does have a grid there, but it doesn't have the lanes in front of you, which is where you want to be looking, as opposed to anything else. So it's a little bit more difficult to figure out what's going on. So I think, honestly, they just need to add those lane markers back into all of the different visual modes that are available within Audiosurf 2. I think that would be an awful lot better. Not bad on the scores, not bad. We've eaten a few blocks, so no stealth mode for me. But do you see what I mean? Like, you always have to be on point in mono mode, and everything you do will affect your high score at the end. Whereas in wakeboarding, that's not really the case. You feel like some of that control has been taken away from you, and a lot of the multiplayer stuff kind of seems a little bit random in terms of how effective it is. You don't have as much control over that as you have over actually generating the right amount of blocks here. You don't necessarily have the control to generate a full stack of blocks in this mode as well, because there might simply not be the blocks that you need in order to make it work in the right amount of time. But I think that that problem is accentuated within wakeboarding mode as opposed to mono there. I forgot how good this song was, but my god, is it kicking my ass in terms of actually hitting all the bloody blocks. Jeez. Oh, there you go. The simple pleasures of Audiosurf are still here. And no doubt, it probably won't cost a lot of money either. It never really did in the first instance. And maybe there will be some really cool mods coming out for it, and it'll certainly give the game a lot more longevity. I think a lot of people would have been interested in Spotify support, but there are probably a lot of reasons why you can't do that. So I appreciate that they put SoundCloud support in there. That's pretty cool. You can Audiosurf podcasts. Don't do that. That's a terrible idea. I tried it once. It was awful. But man, this is a fairly intense track, isn't it? There we go. So I suppose the question is, are you willing to trust the community to develop new and interesting game modes for Steam Workshop? Are you the kind of person that just played mono mode, and do you see any value in acquiring Audiosurf 2 to play mono again? Maybe, of course, for something like Mono Turbo, or maybe there'll be variants of mono that are developed, but there may just be a lot of people that just say, you know what, we should just stick to Audiosurf. To defend the developer, though, you can't really mess with the formula too much. That's difficult, and thankfully, since you have different modes, you can experiment with different things. It's strange, I suppose, that wakeboarding is their flagship mode, but I suppose it makes more sense in comparison to what we otherwise saw from Audiosurf, which did not allow you to surf your music at all. This is not really surfing, I suppose. But yeah, you get the idea. So I think we'll just do the classic mode for the last track. And we'll see how it goes. And I think the other argument to be made, I suppose, in favor of actually buying Audiosurf 2 is, look at the kind of value that you got from Audiosurf for $10. Yeah? I think it is fair. I think it is very, very fair to suggest that this company certainly deserves a little more of your money. Because they did an excellent job with the original Audiosurf. And it cost $10 and people got an absurd amount of fun from it. So to suggest that you should maybe buy their second game, that's reasonable, in my opinion. That is a reasonable acquisition. Right now, of course, in early access, it's perfectly playable, but unless you're absolutely desperate for kind of more of the same, then you should probably wait for the official release and see what kind of improvements they've put in, and also see what kind of modes will be available via the Steam Workshop. So iterative is how I would describe Audiosurf, but also innovative, which is weird. It's like, what are you talking about, TotalBiscuit? You're trying to be horribly pretentious? Not necessarily, no, because Audiosurf is a game of modes, yeah? Audiosurf Mono might as well not even be the same game as Audiosurf Wakeboarding. It pretty much isn't. There are multiple games within games, all tied together by the notion that you ride your music in some way, which is a pretty cool way of doing things. It's a cool way to enjoy music. So last time Audiosurf came out, I found myself listening to a lot more music. It actually got me back into my music in a really big way, whereas before that I was just kind of ignoring it. And is it just me, or does the algorithm just seem a bit tighter this time around? It really does. I mean, these really nice crescendos and also the nice impacts in the beats are working pretty well here, so yeah, it does seem a little better. Well, there you go. That is Audiosurf 2 in its current form, which is currently available on Steam Early Access. It's Audiosurf. What more do you want me to say? My name's been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.